Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1970 film In the Folds of the Flesh, and this is a giallo film, and it has been months since I've actually reviewed a giallo film, so I'm jumping back into it to do a bunch more, and what a movie to do it with. This is a movie that just doesn't stop. As giallo fans, if you've seen enough giallo films, you know to expect some kind of out there, ridiculous, wacky things. This film is way out there. It just throws like twist after twist after twist after twist. So you have to bear with me a little bit with my notes because I do it in real time when I'm watching the film for the first time. So there may be some things that I say that are kind of not accurate for what ended up happening in the end of the film because there are so many twists, but I will fix that as I'm going along. So bear with me just a little bit. Also, real quick, shout out to Room 237 Reviews. He reviews a lot of giallo films, and I haven't watched it yet, but I want to after seeing this film. I saw he has a review for In the Folds of the Flesh, so go ahead and check out his channel as well and check out his review. I'm very interested to see what he had to say about this wild one. Directed by Sergio Bergonzelli, who also did Blood Delirium, Our Lady of Lust, School of Erotic Enjoyment, and The Sea Pirate, just to name a few. Written by Bergonzelli as well as Fabio De Agostini, who wrote scripts for Jukebox, Caesar Against the Pirates, Nightmare Castle, The Red Knights of the Gestapo, The Swiss Affair, and Love Sins, just to name a few. And the idea for this film apparently came from Mario Caiano, who did one of the biggest, underrated giallo gems, in my opinion, Eye in the Labyrinth. It's in my top 10 thus far of all the giallo films I've seen. Really enjoyed that one. This film was reviewed in a very negative way, apparently, just stating that it's very, very convoluted, and I understand. Literally so many WTF moments in this film. I found myself being like, wait, what? Wait, huh? What are we doing now? What are we saying now? They will literally have a twist that tells you one thing about the story, and then a little bit later just give you another twist that negates what they just did in another twist, and it's just like... It does get confusing, so I see where people get it confused. But I think I got it down. I think I understand what's going on here. Also, if you've been watching my 1980s, 70s, 90s superlatives, horror movie superlatives series, I had not seen this film when I did the 70s, and this definitely, if I had seen it, would have been my WTF pick for 1970, because, man... I'm going to rate this two ways, too. It as just like a film in the pantheon of all films, and as like a so bad it's good, wacky giallo film. Do that at the end, obviously. Starting a movie with a severed head and a bunch of people just staring at it is certainly one way to start the film with intrigue. I love that. I love that setup. It's this very big moment of, okay, this is wild that we just started this way. What is going on? I need the backstory for what's going on in this film. So it really hooks you in very, very early, like that. There are some really aggressive cuts right off the bat in this film, and it makes the film really frantic at times. Now, that really does calm down as it goes on, but in the beginning, for the most part, maybe within the first 5 to 10 minutes, just really quick, aggressive cuts that make you kind of have whiplash to a degree watching the film in a sense. But yeah, it just makes things feel very frantic, like they're getting kind of super fast paced. It's the whole scene with the car, the police chasing after Pascal and all of that stuff going down. Seems convenient that a killer ends up on Lucille's property as she's trying to get rid of a body. I meant that in the sense of she should have used him and been like, he killed this guy. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? Instead of just being like, oh, yeah, go ahead, find this guy. She was in the middle, obviously, of burying a body. Antoine's body, we find out by the end. Who was her lover, we find out by the end. Whew, man, oh man. What a wild ride. But, yeah, I was assuming that what she was going to do when the police showed up was be like, there's this dead body, she killed this guy on my property. Which would have been, probably the smarter thing to do, but I guess they would figure that he hadn't been there long enough for something like that to happen. So, yeah. The Freud quotes that end up being presented in the beginning of the film give the idea of trauma having a profound and lasting effect on someone. By the end, we find out it's multiple someone's. And it makes you assume that it's going to really play into like the killer's motive. And let's be honest, that trauma plays into heavily Felice, sorry, God, Felice. It plays heavily into Felice, it plays heavily into Esther, and it plays heavily into Lucille as well. It's all the women in the family have this trauma that's kind of causing them to be someone that they weren't and to act in ways that they wouldn't. Now, we don't know about Lucille's for the longest time until we start getting those like World War II flashbacks with the camp, and certainly very sobering moments in that one. That one's really harrowing and pretty disturbing, but yeah. Those quotes, those Freud quotes really do point to that early on, and you do, if you're actually reading them and thinking about what they're saying, you're really picking up on that and saying that, okay, like trauma is really going to be a thing here, and that's why the film is also called In the Folds of the Flesh, because it actually says something kind of related to that, where it's basically like trauma kind of like lives within your body, and like you can't get rid of it, and it changes you to a degree. There's a time leap, and young Carlin has grown up to be a man attracted to his own sister, apparently. There's a lot of, like, incestuous things going on in this film. Some, they seem incestuous but end up not being, like when Andre shows up, or who was supposed to be Andre, shows up, and he's kind of, like, getting very close to Felice. And you're kind of like, oh, it's going to go in that direction. But even before that, we're getting the whole Carlin and Felice thing. And that's legit, like they were actually related. So, well, were they? Because of, well, I mean, I'm assuming they were related. They don't say it, but I guess there is the possibility that because Lucille was involved with Antoine romantically, that one of the kids could have been, from Antoine. Etruscan tombs. That comes up. Etruscan tombs they talk about. It feels like this pops up in giallo films way more than it should. There have been some giallo films not too long ago that I reviewed, and it was all about like Etruscan tombs. And I think that one of the like one or two of the Fulci films I reviewed recently had something kind of like that as well. It's kind of weird coming up. Carlin choking the dog to death is to keep the body there buried, but it also shows that he's capable of murder. But really, he actually could have just taken that dog and put it in the house. Obviously not a great scene, especially for people where scenes really get to them, and I totally understand that because they do for me too. But it does show that he's capable of murder, so it's kind of there to have him as a bit of a red herring, that you start to think, well, he's doing this, maybe he actually is the one who lopped the head off of Antoine, although at this point we don't know that it's actually Antoine. We're assuming it was Andre, the father. Felice killing Michelle happens pretty soon in the film, and when she's doing it, you're seeing distorted flashbacks that you feel like most likely show what happened to her father in the beginning. Now, you're led to believe that for quite some time until we find out that it was actually Antoine who was killed. But the weird thing about it is they keep doing these flashbacks for Felice, and you think that it's because she was involved. And you see it in a sense of you're thinking that it's showing her actually committing the murder, and that's why she's having these memories. But they explain it in the end of the film. The person from the mental institution where Esther was, or no, where the actual Felice was, I'm talking about Felice as like the new personality Felice, where the original Felice was, that person states that it was like this traumatic experience she went through that basically caused this mental situation where she would like view memories from the perspective of someone else, being actual Felice, who was in the mental institution. Kind of crazy. Like, even me explaining that, it sounds convoluted. And that's how convoluted the film is. They focus on that squawking vulture in the cage a lot. I don't fully understand the reasoning for that. I know they said something, I think Pascal had said something about how they like, smell decaying matter, so it was like always freaking out, probably because there was a body buried near its cage. So I guess it was supposed to be kind of signaling that it could smell the decaying corpses, but I mean, why do you need to keep showing this squawking vulture? It was pretty annoying. So after Michel, the investigator, then is Alex, the investigator, who doesn't really seem like he's interested in doing all that much actual investigating, is more interested in having sex with Felice. And he immediately starts coming at her in a very aggressive way. He's like grabbing her, pulling her onto his lap, just kind of like, let's get it on. Obviously, she goes along with it because she's going to kill him. You know, that's what she did with Michel. She was into him, which I question whether she actually was into him or not, because you have the whole scene later on that comes in where after Pascal's been terrorizing the family, they kill him, and then she sees him dead and is like, oh my God, why'd you do it? You know that I liked him. And you're like, at no point did you act like you liked him. Like, you were being held against your will. He was forcing himself on you. Like, so at that point, you connect that she's very mixed up. You know, she's kind of experiencing things and then forgetting about those things and then thinking of them in a different way. So yeah. And maybe in that moment, she's actually, because of her whole mental situation that's explained at the end, that she's viewing the whole situation with Pascal from kind of Pascal's perspective. I don't know. It goes to another lurid level when Felice and Colin start making out after dancing in a sexual nature. Then it appears that they're about to actually bone right there in front of Alex, who actually seems to be cool with it. This is that extra aspect of the incest that ends up coming in. That incest has been in other giallo films that I've watched, and it's kind of like, what was going on back in the 70s in Italy during this giallo period? Like, what was happening? But that whole scene is very wild, extremely wild, because you're kind of like, okay, brother and sister dancing sexually. Okay, they're making out now. Okay, this guy who knows their brother and sister, Alex, is enjoying this. Oh, now it looks like they may even have sex on the floor in front of him. And he's enjoying that even more. Okay, it's a movie. I like how Alex finds out that the Felice is homicidal, but chooses to laugh about her wig instead of protecting himself from getting his head lopped off. It's such a weird choice, but like, you expect this from giallo films. They always make these kind of like weird, ridiculous choices. He's so focused on just laughing at the wig that he pulls off of her head. It's something. Which, by the way, that's supposed to be a clue in that moment. Like, there's a lot of craziness going on, or a lot of, you know, wild stuff going on at that point, that you're supposed to get wrapped up in that, but that's a clue, because when the wig is taken off of Felice at that point, you see that her hair is actually black, where in her flashbacks, when it's supposedly her, you know, killing her father at this point, killing Andre, who's actually Antoine, she was blonde. So it's this clue to show you she actually has black hair. So that memory is not hers, because she's never been blonde, actually. And she wasn't wearing a wig then, because they didn't wear wigs when they were young. They wore them in Italy when they were women. So I thought that was interesting. Felice lops off Alex's head, and Lucille and Colin are then just like, well, let's get to cleaning this up. Because that seems like what they've been doing. They've been cleaning up. And you get the idea that they're mainly just cleaning up after Felice, which they do, though, for the situation of Alex and Michel. But obviously, they clean up after themselves. Well, at least up after Colin, even though it was Lucille's idea when they kill Pascal. So yeah, they're just like, let's get to doing this. They become very old hat at just disposing of bodies. Well, Pascal does have some good blackmail material when he shows up, as he saw the whole cover-up of what he believes to be the father's death. They then go on this very long stint of just showing him trying to get them to dig up the body, and him kind of terrorizing them, and the assault that happens, and it's just... that goes on too long, in my opinion. It didn't add a ton to the story, especially when they end up killing him off. So it's just like, okay, whatever. We could have cut that down. As expected, you do see J&B in this. I do have to note that, because all good giallo films feature J&B, and even a lot of bad giallo films feature J&B. It's very seldom that I don't see J&B in a giallo film, but there have been some. And I will always note it in my giallo review for that film if there's no J&B, because that's a letdown. There's got to be J&B. They spend an inordinate amount of time on Pascal terrorizing the family. I already talked about that. Pascal is overly excited about his bath at the same time that Lucille and Colin are talking about her World War II flashback, which is disturbing, like I said, and comes up later, and plotting his death. I mean, that whole sequence of him just like playing in the bathtub like he's a child, giallo ridiculousness, over the top. It's quirky. That's the thing. Giallo films always have this quirkiness. So, when Felice flips out about Pascal being killed and says she liked him, you get the idea she doesn't remember killing people or the whole blackmail hostage situation with Pascal. I know I already said that, but there's an extra element in there, which is she doesn't remember killing people. So you assume at that point that she does not remember killing Michelle, and she probably doesn't remember killing Alex either, but she does think that she killed Andre. So people she did kill, she doesn't think she killed, and someone she thinks she killed, she didn't kill. So it's this kind of weird switch. There's a lot of duality in this film, obviously. The biggest one being, you know, the switch with Felice and Esther, and how Felice, who's known as Felice for the majority of the film, is actually Esther, and this woman that we meet who is in the mental institution was actually Felice. Kind of ridiculous and funny when Colin is picking up the severed head of Pascal when they're doing their cleanup. He had it like on a, I don't know, something that he would like jammed into as like a small pitchfork or something, and he's just like picking it up and showing it to Felice and just like twirling it around. And like, you know, it didn't look great, but then again, this was 1970, so you don't expect a lot from practical effects then. So maybe for 1970, it did look really good. But it was just kind of a funny moment, in my opinion. Very ridiculous. So I thought Andre was dead, as did Felice. That became very confusing when he shows up. Obviously, we find out later that he's actually this undercover police officer or inspector who is trying to get to the bottom of what was going on, and he happens to look like Andre. But it's weird because he fools Lucille into thinking that he's Andre. Now, Colin and Felice were not really buying into it, but Lucille buys into it like immediately. So I don't really understand how her having been married to him would think that that's actually him. I don't know, kind of weird. So Felice mistook Antoine for her own father and killed him after being violated. That is far-fetched and ends up not being true. It wasn't Felice who ended up killing him. We find out that the real Felice killed him, and the person who's being called Felice is actually Esther, who just experienced the situation. But then we find again that that's not even the truth. But I'll get to that. What is this now about Esther being brought up? Who is Esther? It just starts getting so confusing at this point in the film. As you start getting closer and closer to the ending, they just keep throwing all these things out. Like I said before, they'll throw out this big twist that reveals some interesting information, and then they negate it with another twist later. So I was very confused for a while. Who is Felice? Who is Esther? Because I was like, okay, this person's been being called Felice the entire time. She must be Felice. And then the girl from the mental institution shows up, and I'm like, well, this must be Esther then, because they're talking about Esther. But then you find out, no, that's actually Felice. And the person who's been called Felice is Esther. And she had like this, she took on the personality of Felice because of the trauma that she had, seeing Lucille, her mother, kill Antoine, but thinking it was Felice who did it, but she was thinking she was Felice. Is that confusing? It's confusing. So then they say Esther was the one who killed Antoine and is now in a mental institution. But Felice must have been there because those flashbacks she was having. But we end up finding out, like that was my reaction when I was watching it, but we end up finding out that yes, she was there, but she was taking on those flashbacks and those memories as if they were her own because of what the person at the mental institution said. Ugh. It dawns on me that Felice's wig is a clue that she didn't kill Antoine because the flashback shows a girl with blonde hair, and when Alex rips off her wig, she has black hair. Just to reiterate, because that's the point in the film where I started really thinking about where they were really questioning who had actually killed Antoine. This is another one of my notes. Hold on. Celeste is actually Esther, and this other woman, the one they faked a death for, is actually Celeste. Yes, they even went to the level of faking the real Celeste's death. And Lucille says that she got hit by a car. They even paid someone to write up a death certificate. They had an actual, grave plot with a headstone, all that rigmarole. So, I mean, they went to lengths with this. This is the best part. They have Antoine's head in a flower pot in their house. First of all, the smell of the flowers is not going to cover that up. I know that the head was in a plastic bag and everything, but there would still be stench coming through because it has a very strong smell. It's something when they break the vase or the flower pot and there's this head there and it's Antoine's head and you're just like, why are you keeping a head in a flower pot in your house? If you're going to keep a head in a flower pot, at least do it outside. At least keep it outside. But I guess it was the whole misdirect thing of like, no one would even assume that it's there. But then here's the question, where's the rest of the body? Where is the rest of the body? What are they doing with the rest of it? I don't know. So Lucille did actually kill Antoine. That was a very winding road to actually get to the truth. Once you get to the end of the film and you understand what was actually going on, you're like, okay, it is kind of convoluted, but not too much so that you can't get it. But the way they keep revealing things makes it super convoluted and very, very, very hard to follow at times. I do like the shot that they have towards the end of the film with Lucille standing between Celeste and Esther. It sums up the whole division of the family and how what Lucille did caused the mental decline of both of her daughters. And really, when you think about it, when the little bit that's revealed about Lucille cheating on Andre with Antoine, it shows that everything originated from Lucille. It was Lucille who was having the affair. It was Lucille who hired Antoine to kill her husband, Andre. It was Lucille who then ended up killing Antoine when he broke in to try and kill Andre, but then was deciding to assault Celeste. So she did it all. And then the whole family ends up paying for this. And there's severe trauma and there's mental decline because of everything that came up because of Lucille, which I'm assuming a lot of that kind of adds up to her killing herself at the end. But I'll talk about that in a second. Then they throw in that Lucille was boning Antoine and had him try to kill Andre. That's when I put in, man, this film doesn't quit. Really, it just does not quit. At that point, I was like, okay, are we done at this point? And then they reveal that whole aspect. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're still going. Pretty wild scene when Lucille kills herself with that tablet that turns out to be toxic gas, which was the same thing that was used on Pascal to kill him in the bathtub when he was having a great time. Especially while they end up throwing in those World War II flashbacks that she had. Seems like it shows her level of trauma and mental damage because of that in her past. And that's what I was saying about those Freud quotes and calling it in the folds of the flesh and how trauma shapes people in bad ways and sticks with you and can cause a lot of mental damage for that reason. It just stays within your body. It stays within the folds of the flesh. And then the reveal that Andre isn't Andre. He actually died in prison, and this is a policeman working undercover. I just put after that, oh man. And at that point, we were done. The film seemed like it was never going to end with all those twists, but I will say this. I'm not sure if this is a film I really want to watch again myself, but this is 100% one of those films I want to show other people. I would think about buying this film just to have that ability. And if someone comes over and be like, look, watch this crazy film, watch this wacky film, and just experience it. I experienced it. You got to experience it. So I will say that when I'm watching it, I'm like, this is convoluted. This is over the top. It's ridiculous. I still really enjoyed it because of how many twists were thrown in there and how wild it is. It's entertaining. It's super entertaining for that reason. The movie's all over the place and they just keep introducing things out of the blue. That's the other thing, is a lot of the twists kind of feel like they're out of the blue, but they do tie in at the end. So There's a level of very smart writing to it, but the execution is just not the greatest, I will say. But I said I was going to rate this in two ways. So as a overall film, because of all the issues it has, that's still 2 stars. But as a so bad it's good giallo film, 4 stars. Definitely. This one is towards the top of my list. It will break my top 25 of giallo films I've seen because, man, it is an experience. And now is when I'd like to hear your thoughts on this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Love it, hate it, in between. We can talk about it. Also, do me a favor. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would really appreciate that. I have more giallo reviews coming. Don't know how many I'm going to be able to do, but I know Shudder's adding a bunch, and there are a few other giallo titles out there that I really felt I needed to get to, that I'm going to work on getting to. So there will be more giallo films coming. It might not be every single week, but I'll see what I can do. But yeah, hopefully people enjoy the ride. Oh, also hit the notification bell button on the channel. That way you'll know when I'm putting up new videos. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.